Okay, first day. In the middle of the semester, with the previous teacher being hospitalized for reckless driving. Okay, you can do this. You can do this. You've taught before in college. This is fine. It'll be okay. This is my classroom, right? Hello, good morning. Sorry I'm a little late. That's all right. This is 12th grade, senior year, history, yes? Good. Okay, thank you. Chalkboard. Who the hell still uses chalkboards in school? Okay, whatever. All right. Do any of you know what your previous teacher was going over before they had to take a leave of absence? No? Okay. Wait. Yeah, I see your hand in the back. Yes? 1970s, 1980s culture? That's very niche. Oh, I'm gonna see what you would learn from that, but alright. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna introduce myself, and then I guess we can figure out something to do with 1970s, 1980s culture. Okay. My name is Mr. Eldridge, E-L-D. Alright. It looks like Eldridge. It's pronounced Eldridge, I swear. But yes, my name is Mr. Eldridge. You can call me that, or you can call me Mr. E. I do not care. Whatever is easier for you. I'm here to teach your history class, even though I went to school not for history. What did I go to school for? Thank you for asking. I went to school for criminal psychology and forensic studies. Now, do any of you know what that is? Kind of like NCIS, I guess. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, okay, yeah. Dexter works too. That's kind of an old show. I'm surprised you've seen that. But yeah, it's something like that. Mostly, the forensic side is, yes, getting involved with crime scenes and going over the body and trying to figure out who did what. But criminal psychology is more in line of trying to get into the mind of the perpetrator, trying to figure out why they do what they do. And it's not always cut and dry. Sometimes it can get very complex. But yeah, you know what? I don't usually teach history. I taught more of my own degree when I was going to school. But I think we can think of something to do with this. Anybody here like true crime? A lot of hands, okay. True crime podcasts? And more hands. There we go. That's mainly the whole class. What you in the front, what do you like to listen to for true crime? That's okay. Well, that works. It's not very creditable. I would listen to literally anything else. What about you? Yeah, you. Okay. That can work too. That's more of an audio drama. That's fine. How about I go ahead and teach you real true crime that occurred? And you know what? This did happen in the 1970s and 1980s, so it does fall under the culture, I guess, of that, whatever your teacher was doing. Okay. So, I was born in the state of New Hampshire, a very small state northeast of the country. Yep, you're right. It's by Vermont. Vermont is a state. Vermont is a state. Okay. Around the time when my mom was living in New Hampshire, there was an incident going on discussing the Connecticut Valley River Killer. Now, does anybody have any idea what that could be? No? This is the name given to a unidentified American serial killer. They believe that they were involved in a series of stabbing murders, mostly centered around Claremont, New Hampshire, and around the Connecticut River Valley, mainly in the early to late 80s. So it still falls under what we're trying to teach you. So, here's how it began. Around the mid-80s, we have 3 young women disappearing around Claremont. 1985, 1986, the skeletal remains of 2 of the women were recovered within 1,000 feet of each other, right outside of Kellyville, New Hampshire. So the condition of the remains seemed brutal. It was very hard to determine the cause of death, but some factors pointed out to multiple stab wounds. Now, between the recovery of the first and the second body, we have another woman who was stabbed to death in a frenzy attack outside of her home in Vermont. And then 10 days later, the remains of the third missing woman were found. Autopsies were conducted by the Vermont Police Department to reveal once again multiple stab wounds in relation to both the first and second woman that were found outside of Kellyville, New Hampshire. So, at this point, we have investigators thinking there's a pattern, there's something going on. The prior homicides, I'm a little nervous, prior homicides seem to be related to the third that just occurred. Now, what's odd is that the first homicide can be dated back to 1978, while the second can be dated to around 1981. Very peculiar that these bodies were found so many years apart, which suggests there's a common perpetrator. The dump sites were also very similar, keep in mind. Nobody's taking notes. Do you guys usually not take note? No? He just puts on movies? You're not used to... Should I stop or... Okay, I'll keep going. I say let's start talking about the victims then. If anybody is too weirded out or grossed out or getting freaked out about what I'm saying, please feel free to go step out in the hall. I trust that you won't walk away. So, first victim was named Kathy Milliken. She was 27 years old. Around October 23rd, 24th, 1978, she left work and went to the Chandler Brook wetland in New London, New Hampshire. She was going to take pictures of some birds. See, back then there wasn't much to do, so taking pictures of birds was fine. However, the next day, her body was just found yards from where she was last seen, and she was stabbed over 20 times, both in the neck and her abdomen. So that was victim 1. Victim 2. Years later, July 25th, 1981, we have 37-year-old college student Mary Elizabeth Critchley, who decided to go hitchhiking from Massachusetts to her home in Waterbury, Vermont, which still, in the 80s, to hitchhike was kind of weird because, you got the Manson family and whatnot. You don't know the Manson family? What? Okay. So, Mary Elizabeth. She was last seen by a friend who dropped her off near exit 13 on the Massachusetts Turnpike. Within 2 weeks later, around August 9th, her body was discovered in a wooded area off Unity Stage Road in Unity, New Hampshire. It's about 80 miles from where she was last seen. And cause of death could not be determined. The body was too disfigured, and there was too many signs pointing to 2 different causes. Okay, now, let's go now 3 years later. We have May 30th, 1984. We have a 17-year-old nurse's aide and high school student named Bernice Quartermadge, who left her home in West Claremont, New Hampshire. Everybody picking up on a trend here? She was going to her boyfriend's house, and it's believed that she was trying to hitchhike there. Very peculiar. We don't have a lot of evidence suggesting that she was hitchhiking. Maybe she was walking. Maybe she was waiting for a friend to pick her up. But we don't know. However, we do know that she was never seen again after that point. Around April 19th, 1986, her body turned up near the Sugar River in Newport, New Hampshire, where she was, once again like the other victims, stabbed to death, and her throat covered in strangulation marks. Again, if you need to get up and walk out, I totally understand. I heard a phone go off. Could we please turn those off for now? Thank you. I appreciate it. So, now we have a trend. We have 3 bodies within, let's say, 1978 to 1986. That's about, it's an 8-year period. So we have 3 bodies, 8-year period, similar trend. Now, can anybody pick up on what I'm trying to talk about here? Yes, serial killings, exactly. What's your name? Okay, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to ask you some questions after. Yes, you have been singled out. So, 3 bodies, similar ways of being brutalized, same causes of death. We have a serial killer on our hands, which is very peculiar because these small towns don't usually have crimes like this occur. I'm from a place called Woodsville, New Hampshire. It's a very small town. Around the time I was born, I think the population was about 800 people. But now we have places like West Claremont, which are bigger than Woodsville. But still, you only get the occasional, drug bust for people dealing some minor marijuana, or you have carjackings. Nothing violent, nothing too out of the ordinary for a town, but now you're getting these serial killings. So let's fast forward 2 months now, July 20th, 1984. We have a 26-year-old Ellen Ruth Fried, who's also a registered nurse from Claremont who worked at the Valley Regional Hospital. She was calling her sister from a payphone at Leo's Market. Leo's Market is a well-known spot in New Hampshire. She said that there was a car circling her in the parking lot. She didn't think anything of it. She just recognized that there's a car circling the parking lot. Don't know if they're circling me. She left to make sure that her car would start so she could go home. Her car was able to start. She said goodbye to people at work, and she took off. However, that was the last anybody heard from her. She was never heard again. 18 months later, in September 19th, 1985, excuse me. Jeez, I know, I'm hungry. September 19th, 1985, her skeletal remains were found on the banks of the Sugar River in an isolated area near Kellyville, 8 miles outside of Claremont. So the damage to the body indicated that she had been stabbed, which is, in line with everything else. Sorry, I'm doing this all from memory. Is it okay if I look this up on my computer real quick? Okay. Guys, please, phones. Please turn them off. I don't want the principal coming in here and getting mad at me. No cell phone policy. I know, it sucks. I have my phone off too. We can turn them on when we get to lunch, I think. I don't know. It's my first day. You do you. Okay, here we go. Here's my notes on this. All right. Now, July 10th, 1985, 27-year-old mother Ava Marie Morris vanished while hitchhiking from work on Route 12 between Charlestown, New Hampshire, and Claremont. April 25th, 1986, her remains were found in the woods in Unity, several miles from Route 12. She'd been stabbed and her throat was slit. She was found just 500 feet from where Mary's body was found. There's a lot of these. I can keep going over these. You want me to keep going? Nobody freaked out? Thumbs up? All right, thanks, guys. All right. April 15th, 1986, we have 36-year-old Linda M. Moore, who was home alone while her husband was at work. At around 2 p.m., she was seen in the yard of her home on Route 121 in Saxons River, Vermont. About an hour later, her husband found her dead in their living room. She had been stabbed 25 times. The evidence indicated that she was engaged in a violent struggle with whoever was her assailant. There was no signs of forced entry, robbery, or ransacking. So whoever this person was, they let him in, which leads us to believe that maybe this specific victim knew who the person was, or the assailant themselves pretended to be someone such as a door-to-door salesman around the late 80s, which are more common than they are now, and let this person in to discuss something. But whatever it was, there was no way that it was a robbery, or there was no way that there was forced entry. So now, here's our last known victim of this individual. January 10th, 1987, 38-year-old registered nurse Barbara Agnew went skiing with friends on Stratton Mountain. At around 10 p.m., she left, heading home to Norwich, despite a snowstorm in the area. A few days later, a green BMW was found at the rest stop off of Route 91 in Hartford, Vermont. The doors were wide open, and blood was on the steering wheel, back seat, and front windshield. Some of the blood-stained belongings of hers were found in a nearby dumpster. Police are not certain why she apparently pulled off into the rest stop since she was just a few miles from home. On March 20th, her body was found near Advent Hill Road in a wooded area in Heartland, Vermont. It was 12 miles from the rest area. She'd been stabbed repeatedly in the neck and chest. She had many defensive wounds, as well as a disabling wound. Now, a disabling wound, can anybody tell me what that is? Does anybody know what a disabling wound might be? No. So, a disabling wound is an injury considered disabling if the result in the following. It can be impairment of a bodily function, the loss of a body part, or the lack of use of a body part. So, for example, the disabling wound in this case scenario was a blunt object being struck to the back of the victim's head, therefore concussing them. Thus, then, the continuing acts may occur. So, here's what we have. We have little physical evidence, no witnesses, and multiple victims. A lot of the investigators from Vermont, New Hampshire, and now Connecticut were just stunned. So as a last resort, New Hampshire State Police brought in a criminal psychologist named John Philippin to develop a profile on who the killer might be. He said that his approach is to gather as much of the same information that the police use in the very beginnings, such as police reports of the crime scene, autopsy reports, and autopsy photographs. Every bit of information that would be available typically to investigators is what he was using. So now we have Now we have notes from a Detective Sergeant Clay Young of New Hampshire State Police, and he notes that from a law enforcement standpoint, profiling is something that can help with investigation. It is not so scientific that it is absolute, if it's not going to tell you this is the individual, but it does give you the type of individual that you can be looking for. If you have a suspect, it can tell you whether or not you are on the right avenue or you are approaching the right person at least. So, in the beginning of the investigation, we have several trips out to locations where Bernice and Ellen were killed. The first few times were simply to have something of a feel for the place. Several questions were asked that investigators and Philippine wanted to answer, such as what could be heard at the time, what was being smelt at the time, what was the overall place like, what it felt like atmosphere-wise, how could a crime between these two people been occurred or conducted in a space like this? Just overall, how could this be happening? So Philip stated that when he gets to the point where he's beginning to develop some feel for what is happening in the mind of a killer, he'll go back to the scene using what he's learned and simply going through what might have just happened as though he was the killer himself. So he's reenacting these crimes in the killer's standpoint. So here he's going through this mindset. He's trying to answer similar questions now from the killer's point of view. Exactly what is the killer hearing? Does he hear the noise of the river flowing nearby, or can you not hear it at all? Is he so focused on the activity of killing the individual that he just doesn't hear it at all? What does this tell about the killer's ability to perceive in their senses? Does this killer have good hearing, bad hearing, good eyesight, bad eyesight? Does the killer have some sense of smell? Do they have diluted smell, and so on and so forth? What we can conduct, though, is that the killer does do a lot of driving, because Philippine believes that the killer selects sites that are low risk for him. So rather than stalking a particular victim, he selects sites and goes from those sites. He says that it might be ritualistic, and that it might be a very strong need to take away something from these women. However, evidence does state that tire tracks are found on the site, but they're so muddled that we can only determine that a vehicle was on site. So yes, the killer is moving from site to dispose and conduct these crimes. I'm going to discuss more about the mind of the killer. Again, I'm going to keep stating this throughout the lecture. If you are uncomfortable by this, please, at any point, put your hands up. I'll let you go sit out in the hall and everything will be fine. So now, we'll get into the mind of the killer. During this time, the killer believes that he's overpowering and owning these people. He can do whatever he wishes, and part of that is scaring them. So there's nothing sexual occurring. It's just a matter of power and scaring these women. So we're not going to get into any of that stuff. Don't worry. This is all just completely just discussing killer stuff. Don't tell your principal I'm talking about this. Don't tell your principal I'm talking about serial killing. Okay. So now, let's keep moving forward in the timeline. We have August 6th, 1988. We have a 22-year-old named Jane Borowski, who was on her way home from the Cheshire County Fair when she stopped to get a drink from a vending machine outside of Gamaliel Supermarket along Route 10 in West Swansea, New Hampshire. It was a very hot evening, and she was 7 months pregnant. If there was a killer on the loose, this would probably be the best person for their next kill. Yes, it is very morbid, but in my line of work, or in my line of study, we have to be able to dive deep and think about these things. It's a little uncomfortable, but eventually you get good at it and you're able to differentiate your emotions from that of yourself and that of the person you're trying to embody who's conducting these crimes. Psychology is about understanding, so we need to understand why this person is doing what they're doing. Okay, so we have Jane. She bought her drink, and then a car pulls up to the right side of hers. Jane now walks back to her car, and the man in the other car gets out and walks up to her driver's side window. He's asking if the payphone is working. She said she doesn't know if it works. This is when he opened her car door and tried pulling her out. She then starts to fight him, and he pulls out a knife. He gets her out of the car, which is Jane now pleading, please don't hurt her, she is pregnant. Jane is now asking what the man wanted, and he was saying, you hurt my girlfriend really bad. However, to Jane, she has no idea what is going on. She's explaining that she did not hurt anybody or hasn't any clue what he's talking about. He then screams, "This is a Massachusetts car, isn't it?" Which she responded that no, this is a New Hampshire car. At some point, Jane's trying to break away, and the man's plan to abduct her is not going well, going awry. Jane is able to escape and starts running down the parking lot. However, the man is able to catch up, tackle her, and stab her 18 times in the neck and chest. After stabbing Jane, the man returned to his car, assuming that she is now dead. However, Jane is able to roll over, get on her hands and knees, and start crawling to her car. He drove past her and looked down at her, and then drove away, thinking that she's going to die anyway, might as well get going. So now, Jane is up. She feels she's bleeding. She thinks she's going to die, but she's thinking, I need to get to my friend's house for help. So Jane is full, 18 stab wounds. She somehow manages to get to her car and drives to her friend's house 2 miles away. When she left the parking lot, she felt like she was driving fast. She was in shock. She was not exactly sure how fast she was driving. According to police, she was going pretty fast because before she knew it, she was behind the car that attacked her. However, she was afraid that if she stopped or that he stopped, that he was going to follow her or something bad was going to happen. So Jane gets to her friend's house. So does the attacker. She notices that she's still alive and that she's walking to the house. So he turns back. He stops in front of the house, though, and then disappears just to make sure that everything's okay. So Jane's friend comes out, gives her aid. Police and paramedics were called in. None of the stab wounds hit vital organs or her child. 2 months later, she gives birth to a healthy baby girl. Jane is still fine to this day. So now this is something that I don't agree that Philippine did, which is put Jane under hypnosis, which I don't particularly think is particularly helpful for this scenario, but according to Philippine, it was just a good way to provide an eyewitness account of her ideal, to put her under a trance. And from what she said during the session, it became clear to him that she was not being stalked. Her decision to go to the fair was a last-minute one. She had no sense of anybody following her on the way there, or while she was there, or while she was going home. She was able to give very specific details of the attacker getting out of the car, coming up on her car, making remarks about the payphone as well, and talking about Massachusetts car and his girlfriend and so on and so forth. So what we can gather is that the attacker is very deliberate, methodical, and super calm when conducting these. So based on Jane's description, he does not get rattled, is very much in control, and is very patient about what is occurring in front of him. Jane also recalled that he seemed so calm and cool about everything going through the whole ordeal that he didn't get mad once, showed nervousness, and nothing bothered him. So Jane seemed to be describing a very tremendous struggle, a huge amount of resistance on her part, and desire to protect herself and her kid. But at some point during the assault, it was as though she had done everything that she could do, and she could not do anymore, stopped struggling, and it was at that point the assault stopped. So according to Philippine, it seems as though that the greater her resistance, the more determined that the killer was to follow through. As soon as there's no resistance, the attack starts to end. We then have Philip talking about the drive to Jane's friend's house. Is what it is. But she does remember coming up behind the attacker's car and focusing in on his license plate. The numbers being 662. However, the rest of the license plate was way too dirty. But we do get a make and model of the car. So we have a range from, it could be a 75 and 85 year model. But we do know that it is now a Jeep Wagoneer. So we're coming up on more details about this killer through a process that I don't agree with, but that's okay. You're getting uncomfortable? Yeah, that's fine. You can go outside. That's fine. I'm sorry. Again, I'm going to keep saying it. I keep saying I'm going to keep saying it, but I'm going to keep saying it again. If you are uncomfortable from this subject matter, please go ahead and go. It's totally fine. If anybody asks why, you can just say that Mr. Eldridge is giving a lecture that makes me uncomfortable, so I'm going to wait until the class period's over and go to my next class, go to my lunch period, or whatever period you have next, okay? Just don't lie about it. Just be upfront about it. Okay, so after we have descriptions of the attacker's car, one of the things that the police decided to do is see if they could identify it. But in order to do that, they've enlisted the help of the states of Vermont, more New Hampshire law enforcement, and Massachusetts. They generated a computer printout of all Jeep Wagoneers registered at the time in all 3 states that matched the description. This went from a huge 30,000, 40,000 search, but the police were able to narrow it down to 1,350 all throughout New England. However, none of these were able to help. This didn't lead to any suspect. So now the investigation is stalled again, but with a crucial difference. The difference is the police don't know who the killer is, but because of Jane's eyewitness descriptions, they believe that they can get a concept of what he looks like and how he's thinking. So Philpin believes that the killer is a loner type of person who prefers his own thoughts and fantasies, doesn't like intrusions, views women in an extremely negative point of view to the point of hostility, and viewing them as arrogant, intrusive types of people. Philpin also says that he can see him making an adjustment that one might call within the realm of the normal, but it would require, he thinks, very limited exposures to groups of people. So Philpin thinks that this person's trying to adapt themselves to societal norms, but they're doing it very limited and exposing themselves in small bursts in order to make that adjustment in their life. We go back to Jane. She's feeling very fortunate to be alive. She wishes that her attacker could be found so that what happened to her can happen to nobody else, and she fears that his next victim might not be as fortunate as she was to get away. New Hampshire State Police are not convinced that they're indeed dealing with a serial killer after many unsolved murders. We have 7 unsolved murders, but New Hampshire State Police do not believe that there's a serial killer. Authorities suspect that if the murderers are a work of one man, he may have moved to another part of the country, or perhaps because of Jane surviving the attack that he did move. Their hope was that if he might be incarcerated from some other crime, but if not, their fear is that he's still on the loose, killing at random. All right, so suspect stands approximately 5'7" to 5'8", based on Jane's description, weighs between 150 and 160, blonde hair, clean shaven, and is driving a golden brown Jeep Wagoneer with a license plate including the numbers 662. He seemed to be in his mid-30s to early 40s, but this description was given around 1981, so he may be way older than that, and Jane described him as a very normal-looking individual. So police also have description of a similar man seen near Linda's home on the day of her murder. So he may have also been hitchhiking, he may be some kind of hitchhiker, he may just be driving around a lot, but who knows. So we have a clean-shaven, white male with a round face, dark rimmed glasses, and neatly trimmed hair, who at the time of these killings, the last killing or the incident with Jane, between the ages of 25 to 30, kind of stocky, and carrying a bright blue knapsack, which, no idea, if it's not known if he's actually connected or if the knapsack has any connection, but that was a description that Jane was able to use. So, here's the deal. This case was aired on many TV shows. We have True Hollywood, THS Investigations, we have a book released by Philip called The Shadow of Death, The Hunt for a Serial Killer, which is all about this case. And then Jane was also filmed in a lot of these. She was filmed silhouette. She did not give her full name for these broadcasts, but she did give interviews. However, it's very weird because a lot of these broadcasting things change the date of Jane's attack, change her age, and change the location of some of the homes of these people, and a lot of the disappearance dates. However, what I'm reading to you or what I'm relaying to you is the official stuff, so don't worry. All right. So, this case is still open, but there is some indication that it might have been concluded. So, after a lot of these broadcasts, an Idaho law enforcement officer called in the telecenter. He recognized the composite as matching a man who was being held in Idaho jail for the murder of a different woman. However, it's not known if anything came from this. And then sadly, since her attack, Jane has been hospitalized for depression. It's a very traumatizing experience. Jane is still undergoing medical treatment. And that being said, regardless of what happens to you, anybody in this room, please, if you need help, seek it. I go to a therapist myself. It is very helpful. Anybody can go to therapy. Don't worry. Okay, so, Good morning, principal. How can I help? I'm in trouble. I told you I'm not a history teacher. I'm teaching what I know. This is what I know. What do you mean it's not appropriate? This is just what happens in the Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll go. All right, thank you, class. Today was my first and last day. Your principal does not believe in teaching you exactly what happens in this world, so I hope you enjoy whatever teacher they get next to come in and teach you whatever bullshit. Have a good fucking day. Goodbye.